Most people think they know Appalachia. Hidden across these mountains are ancient walls, chambers, and monuments that still don't fit the story of who lived here or what they were capable of. Some were built by cultures we know, others by people who disappeared before history was ever written down. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why one of these structures doesn't seem to fit the official timeline at all. Number 25. The wall that fences nothing. Walk the low ridges of northwest Georgia and you'll cross the first mystery without ever noticing. Long lines of dry laid stone run through these trees, no mortar holding them, just rock fitted to rock for stretches that add up to miles. Ask a local and you'll hear the easy answer. Old colonial fence line. Some dead farmer's property marker. The trouble starts the second you follow one to its end. They climb slopes no plow ever touched. They cut across hillsides where there was nothing to keep in and nothing to keep out. A fence is supposed to make sense, and these make none. And here's the part that unravels the whole farmer theory. Some of these segments predate the documented arrival of European settlers entirely. So the man everyone blames may never have set foot here. What you're left with is masonry that encloses nothing, built by people who, on the official calendar, weren't supposed to exist yet. It's also the first crack in the story. Number 24. The wall that defended nothing. Climb higher and the riddle drops its disguise. Near the top of Fort Mountain in Georgia sits a wall of stacked stone running 855 feet along the ridge, zigzagging in a shape so deliberate the name stuck to the entire mountain. Everyone calls it a fort. Here is what nobody can explain. It defends nothing. No gate, no enclosed space behind it, no high ground and low ground. None of the things a real fortification needs to function. What it does have is a line of 19 shallow pits. And to this day, nobody can tell you what they held or why. So the builders left a wall and a row of holes and no explanation. Now here is where it gets strange. The Cherokee knew this country down to the last creek bed, and when asked about this wall, they did not claim it. Their stories pointed backward, to an older people already long gone. When they arrived, a moon-eyed race, some accounts say, builders lost to time. Sit with that. When the people with the deepest memory of a place tell you they inherited the mystery too, you are no longer dealing with something old. You are dealing with something older than memory itself. Number 23. Someone was counting the sun. 200 miles north, the mystery goes quiet, and somehow that makes it worse. Up on the Allegheny Front in eastern West Virginia, certain ridgelines are scattered with cones of stacked stone, far too clean to be anything nature dropped. A rock slide leaves chaos. This is the opposite. Each pile is balanced, shaped, set one stone at a time by hands that wanted a cone in that exact spot and nowhere else. And the spots are the whole secret. Several of these cairns sit along clear sightlines, and a number of those lines point straight at the place on the horizon where the sun breaks through on the solstice. Picture what that required. Somebody stood on a freezing, wind-scoured ridge and watched the sky turn through an entire year. Then they marked the turning point in stone, permanently, so it could be read again the next year and the year after that. That isn't decoration, that's mathematics, done without paper, by people who didn't need any. Somebody up here was counting the sun, and they left the tally behind for us to stumble onto. And everything so far, the walls and the piles, you could almost argue away. Almost. Because the mountains are about to start talking, and what they say doesn't translate. Number 22, the page nobody can read. In a quiet field in western North Carolina lies a slab of soapstone that is, by any honest description, a page of writing no living person can read. They call it Judicula Rock, and its surface carries more than 1,500 separate carvings, swirls, and lines and figures pressed into the stone across centuries nobody can date. The Cherokee tie it to Tsul Kalu, a giant from the old stories, who left his seven-fingered handprint in the rock as he leapt across the land. It is one of the most densely carved stones in the entire eastern United States, and most people drive right past the turnoff. Now here's the part that should keep you up. The style of these carvings does not cleanly match anything else nearby. It does not fit the known record the way the experts would prefer. So you stand over this slab knowing it meant something exact and urgent to someone, knowing every mark was a deliberate choice, and knowing the key was buried with the hands that made it. A full page of careful writing from a language that left no alphabet behind to crack it. Number 21. The argument. Louder than the answer. Tucked into a Georgia national forest sit 6 soapstone boulders carved with rings, crosses, animal shapes, and forms that look just enough like footprints to earn the place its misleading name, Track Rock Gap. The tracks aren't tracks. It's one of the largest clusters of rock carvings anywhere in the Southeast, and that alone would buy its spot here. But the real fight is uphill. There, stone terraces step across the mountainside in long, deliberate tiers, and the question of who built them and when set off an argument that has outlived most of the people who started it. On one side, archaeologists with careful fieldwork. On the other, theorists reaching for lost civilizations. They've been swinging at each other over these terraces for years, and through all of it, the stones just sit there, silent, indifferent to the noise. The argument has grown far louder than any answer it's ever produced. Hold on to that, because it's a warning. On this list, the loudest mysteries are almost never the deepest ones. Number 20. The underground rooms built for nobody. Along the spine of the Blue Ridge, on the line between Virginia and North Carolina, there are rooms hidden inside the earth, and you'd walk over one without knowing. From the outside, each reads as a low bump in the ground, nothing more. Step closer and the bump becomes a doorway. The doorway becomes a chamber. Walls of fitted stone, roofed with heavy overlapping slabs, then buried under soil until the whole structure disappears into the hillside. Some are too cramped to have sheltered anyone for long, which kills the simplest explanation before you've finished saying it. And a handful line up with the sky, the doorway framing one specific sunrise on one specific morning of the year. The official verdict leans toward colonial root cellar, a cold store for potatoes. For plenty of these, that's almost certainly true. But the root cellar answer has to look away from the alignment. It has to ignore the door that opens onto a sunrise and nothing else. And that leaves you with a basement built into a mountain for something that never needed to eat. Number 19. The refrigerator, the mountain, built. Step out of human hands for a moment, because not everything strange in these hills was stacked on purpose. In a North Carolina gorge sits a place called Bat Cave, and it is not the cave you're imagining. It's a fissure system, a massive jumble of granite boulders that sheared off the cliffs and froze mid-collapse into a maze of passages reported to be the largest of its kind in the East. You squeeze between slabs the size of houses into chambers no architect ever drew. And then comes the detail that turns your skin cold. Literally. Air pours up out of the lower depths, and parts of this maze stay near freezing through the dead heat of a southern August. You can stand sweating at the mouth of it and be shivering 40 feet in shorts, in summer. Nature built a refrigerator inside a mountain, and it never bothered to explain why. Number 18. The gateway aimed at one morning. In Tennessee, 2 forks of a river wrap around a high plateau like arms folding over something precious. And on that plateau sits a 50-acre enclosure ringed by walls of earth and stone roughly 2,000 years old. For generations, people assumed it was a fort, because what else do you call a big wall on high ground? But it never saw a battle, and it was never meant to. The walls are too irregular, the openings too wide and welcoming, the entire design indifferent to defense. So what was it for? The answer was written in the sky the whole time. The main entrance lines up with the summer solstice sunrise, framing the exact notch on the horizon where the sun lifts on the longest day of the year. Picture it the way it must have happened. 2,000 years ago, a crowd gathering at a stone gateway in the dark, breath fogging, waiting for a single thread of light to thread the opening they had built precisely to catch it. It was made to watch the heavens, not to stop an enemy. We've reached the wall's limit. They marked the sky, they fenced nothing, they guarded nothing. From here down, the mountains stop counting the sun and start burying their dead, and the scale of it is hard to hold in your head. Number 17, the hill that's actually a tomb. On the flats above the Ohio River sits a town named Moundsville, and it was named for exactly one reason. Rising out of the middle of it is the largest cone-shaped burial mound in the entire country. 62 feet of piled earth on a base wider than a football field, raised more than 2,000 years ago by the people we call the Adena. Now understand what that meant in a world with no wheels, no carts, no machines. This hill went up one woven basket of dirt at a time, hauled on human backs over years by a society organized enough to spend a generation building a monument for the dead. And most travelers blow past it without a second look. The mound earned its fame from one object, a small inscribed stone said to have come out of it in the 1830s, carved with characters scholars have fought over ever since. Real artifact to some, outright hoax to others. That fight never closed and probably never will. But strip the controversy away and one fact still stops you cold. There is a hill in the middle of an ordinary American town that is, from base to summit, a grave. Number 16, the tomb. They built a road. Around. A little deeper into West Virginia, the modern world does something almost darkly funny. In South Charleston stands the second largest burial mound in the state, 33 feet of Adena earthwork, and when the city grew up around it, nobody had the heart or the permits to move it. So they did the next thing. They routed a road into a neat circle around its base. There is a sacred tomb sitting in the middle of a traffic circle like a roundabout with a body count. A 19th century dig cut into the top and found human remains stacked inside, several people arranged with deliberate care, the mound doing exactly the job its builders intended, even as the town forgot to be impressed. And today, drivers loop past it hundreds of times a week without ever registering that the grassy hill in the median is somebody's grave. Nobody moved it. Nobody really studied it. The modern world just paved a ring around the dead and kept driving. Number 15. The spa is the new part. Almost everyone who knows this next place knows it for one fact. George Washington bathed here. The warm springs in West Virginia's eastern panhandle have been a fashionable resort for so long that the resort has completely swallowed what came before it. But those cut stone basins and channeled rock that move the water around weren't all dreamed up by powdered 18th century spa builders. This was a known, used, worked site for centuries before any colonial gentleman decided the warm water was good for his joints. People had been shaping stone around these pools for a very long time, drawn to the one spot for miles where the ground ran warm in the dead of winter. So here's the quiet joke, buried in the brochure. The genteel little spa town is the newest layer. The spa is the recent part. And almost nobody soaking in that water ever stops to ask who did the real work first. Number 14. The walls where no farm could live. climb to nearly 4,800 feet up a high Allegheny Ridge in West Virginia, and you'll find curving dry stone walls where no farm has ever stood. And that contradiction is the entire mystery. The standard explanation for stone walls in this country is always farming. Clearing fields, marking edges. But farming needs flat ground, real soil, and a reason to be there. And this ridge offers none of the three. These walls bend in long serpentine lines across a slope too high and too steep to have ever been worth plowing. No homestead record, no livestock logic, no settlement at all. Somebody hauled and fitted heavy stone near the roof of a mountain, by hand, for a purpose that left absolutely nothing else behind. No house, no graves, no tools, just the walls. It's a staggering amount of labor spent for a reward nobody can point to. And in these mountains, effort with no obvious payoff has a way of turning out to mean the most. Number 13, the doorway. Everyone walked through and no one studied. Down at the corner where Kentucky, Virginia, and Tennessee press together lies the Cumberland Gap, the single most famous doorway in American history. And almost nobody who walked through it ever looked up. Tucked nearby is Sand Cave, which is not really a cave at all. It is an enormous sandstone overhang, an arched ceiling so vast and so smooth it looks carved by hand, the rock banded in rust and gold and pink that shift as the light moves across them. It is one of the most staggering natural rooms in the entire region, and it sits right along the route that funneled hundreds of thousands of settlers west. Inside and nearby are stacked stone features older than the trail records, older than the wagon ruts, older than the very name we gave the pass. Think about who came through here. Daniel Boone, the Long Hunters, the wagons, the entire westward tide of a young country squeezed through this gap. And almost none of them stopped to study what was already standing inside it when they arrived. That's the first half of the map. Walls that fence nothing, forts that guard nothing, tombs in traffic circles, and the most famous doorway in America with a mystery hiding right beside it. We're past the easy explanations now. Everything from here down gets harder to wave away. And the closer we get to number 1, the quieter the experts become. Number 12, the fortress built for a war nobody remembers. By now, the word fort should make you suspicious. And a Kentucky summit called Indian Fort Mountain earns every ounce of it. Along its rim run low stone breastworks, positioned exactly as if to hold the high ground against someone climbing up to take it. Against whom, with what, and why are the questions that simply refuse to resolve. Because here's the flaw in calling it a fortress. There's no reliable water on top. None. Which means nobody could have held this position through a real siege. Not for a day. A fort you can't survive in isn't a fort. It's a gesture. And the layout matches no conflict anyone has found in the recorded history of the region. So picture standing on that summit, ringed by walls built to repel an enemy who left no name, in a war that either never came or was never written down. Somebody prepared with enormous effort for a battle that history has completely forgotten, if it was ever coming at all. Number 11, the marker above the tree line. The highest point in all of West Virginia is a windswept summit called Spruce Knob, where the wind is so relentless the spruce trees grow lopsided, branches only on the sheltered side, whole forests combed flat by a permanent gale. And among those wind-bent trees sit cairns of stacked stone, weathered nearly level by centuries on the most punishing ground in the state. Their placement predates any recorded trail. Read that again, slowly. Before the loggers came, before the surveyors, before there was any path at all to follow up that mountain, somebody climbed to the highest, harshest, coldest point available to them. And they chose deliberately to build there. Whatever those cairns marked was worth carrying heavy stone above the tree line, into a place that fights you for for every single step. Somebody climbed higher than the loggers ever would, generations before them, and stacked stone at the top of the world to prove they'd stood there first. Number 10. The coffins made of stone. The river country of Middle Tennessee hides a quieter kind of unsettling. The dead here were buried in coffins made of rock. The Mississippian people built what we now call stone box graves, lining the sides and floor with flat limestone slabs and sealing the body beneath a stone lid, a fitted container of solid rock for a single human being. Thousands have been documented, entire cemeteries of slab boxes, sometimes stacked and clustered across whatever flat ground a community could spare. And here's the detail that lingers long after you've left. The boxes hold adults and infants alike. The smallest graves, built for children, were made with exactly the same care as the largest. The same fitted limestone, the same patience, the same craft for a baby as for an elder. These weren't rushed or careless burials. This was a tradition kept alive across countless generations, in cemeteries far older than any county whose lines now run carelessly over them. Number 9. The blueprint with no city. Ask 100 people where the second tallest ancient mound in the United States stands, and not one will know. It's in Tennessee, the centerpiece of a complex of around 17 mounds above a river, raised in an era we call the Middle Woodland period. The tallest climbs about 72 feet, an artificial hill built entirely by hand roughly 2,000 years ago, and then quietly left out of the national story altogether. But the height isn't what sets this place apart. It's the plan. These mounds aren't scattered at random. They're arranged with clear geometric intent, placed in deliberate relationships to one another, the way a city is laid out on paper before a single building goes up. Somebody drew this before they built it. They had a design, a vision, a sense of the whole. It's the blueprint of a city, executed in earth and sweat. For a city that somehow never quite appears. We're inside the top 10 now, and you may have already felt the change. The early mysteries were strange. These last ones are organized. They show planning, mathematics, coordination, and organization is the one thing the standard story keeps insisting these mountains weren't supposed to have. Number 8. The wall shaped like a living thing. On a ridgeline in far eastern Kentucky, near a river called the Big Sandy, there is a wall that flatly refuses to behave like a wall. Instead of running the straight, sensible line a boundary marker wants, it bends. It undulates across the land in a long, sinuous curve that reads less like masonry and more like a body in motion. And shaping the land into the form of an animal is not unheard of around here. The great serpent earthworks of the Ohio Valley are its famous cousins, enormous creatures sculpted into the ground for reasons we still only half understand. This one curves with the contour of the ridge, oriented to the terrain rather than to any fence line need. And a boundary wall has no reason on this earth to curve for beauty. Geometry does not bend like that by accident. Somebody wanted the shape itself. Somebody wanted a serpent of stone laid across a Kentucky ridge, and we may never know what it was meant to watch over or to keep away. Number 7. The tools left beside the mammoths. Now the floor drops out from under the entire timeline. At a place called Saltville in southwest Virginia, an ancient salt marsh trapped and preserved the deep past in its mud. And what came out of that mud rewrites how long we know people have been in these mountains. Mammoth bones, other Ice Age animals, and lying right beside them, worked stone tools, human tools. The evidence points to people standing on this exact ground something like 14,000 years ago, at the very end of the last Ice Age. This isn't a wall or a mound someone built. This is the raw, undeniable fact of human beings standing here while mammoths still breathed and the glaciers were still grinding their slow way north. stone tools and butchered bone, side by side, at the ragged edge of a vanished world. Everything else on this list is recent by comparison. This is the deep end of the timeline. And the water down here is very, very dark. Number 6, 10,000 years in a single room. In the far corner of Alabama, where one of these old plateaus breaks apart, a single shelter of limestone holds something almost impossible to picture. Roughly 10,000 years of human life, stacked in one room. This place, called Russell Cave, was occupied on and off, nearly without a break, across that entire span. And the floor kept the record. Excavators dug straight down through layer after layer of human living, tools, ancient hearths, the remains of meals, burials, each level a different age of people using the same dry overhang for the same simple reasons. Shelter, warmth, a roof against the rain. It's one of the longest unbroken records of human presence anywhere in North America, written vertically into the dirt of one cave. Think about that span. Whole civilizations rose and fell on other continents, while families kept lighting fires on this exact patch of ground. Century after century, the same shelter, the same dry floor, the same firelight, flickering across 10,000 years. Number 5, the capital we never named. Return to those Georgia foothills and face the largest thing on the entire map. The Etowah Mounds are the surviving heart of a true city, anchored by a flat-topped earthen pyramid that rises about 63 feet. 6 full stories of packed earth, raised by hand, basket by basket. This was no burial pile. This was a platform, a stage for the rulers of a layered society that farmed, traded, governed, and read the heavens from the summit of a mountain. They built themselves out of dirt. And the people who dug here pulled carved marble statues out of the ground, seated figures with calm, careful faces. The portraits of a people we can describe in detail, study, hold in our hands, and still cannot name. A real capital stood here, with priests and rulers and astronomers and crowds going about their lives in the Georgia foothills. We simply never learned the word they used for the place they called home. 5 left. And here is where the experts go quiet, because the closer we get to number 1, the less the textbooks have to offer, until at the very bottom they stop answering altogether. Number 4, the walls, where carrying stone makes no sense. There's a gorge in North Carolina that is one of the most rugged, least forgiving places in all the Eastern Mountains. A deep chasm of cliffs and tangled, near vertical slopes. And down inside it, the walls make no sense whatsoever. There are stone enclosures built into this gorge, set in terrain so brutally steep that simply reaching some of them on foot is a serious, sweating ordeal even today. So ask the obvious question, why here? Nobody settled this place. There's no flat ground to settle on, no fields to clear, no earthly reason for a homestead inside a rock cleft like this one. And yet somebody carried and stacked heavy stone in a spot where hauling a single rock uphill leaves you gasping for air. Every practical explanation assumes a practical motive, and practicality is the one thing this location flatly refuses to offer. The difficulty wasn't an obstacle the builders had to overcome. The more you stare at it, the more the difficulty starts to look like the entire point. Number 3, the signature of a vanished nation. Where a mountain range lifts out of the North Carolina Piedmont at the eastern edge of the highlands, there are aligned rows of stone tied by name to a people who are no longer here. The Saura lived in this country, and then they left it early, pushed out and scattered before the era of detailed colonial record-keeping had even begun. They left behind their name on the mountains, and in places, these deliberate lines of rock. And that is exactly what makes this one haunt you. The builders weren't merely anonymous, the way so many on this list are. They were a named nation, a people we can point to, and they vanished from this land before anyone ever wrote down what these rows were for. You can name the hand that laid the stone and still never reach the meaning behind it. It's a signature, pressed into a mountainside by a nation that history erased before it ever finished reading the sentence they left behind. Number 2, the two civilizations buried together. When the first pioneers arrived at a spot in Ohio where two rivers meet, they did something that tells you they understood exactly what they had stumbled onto. They found a large ancient burial mound raised by the Adena 2,000 years before, and instead of leveling it for farmland, which they easily could have, they built their own cemetery around it. They ringed that ancient monument with their own 19th century graves. They even preserved the great earthworks nearby, including a raised processional avenue they called the Sacra Via, the Sacred Way. So in one quiet place, you have the dead of two civilizations sharing the same consecrated ground, separated by 2,000 years and joined by the very same instinct about the spot. Those settlers could have plowed the whole thing under without a second thought. Instead, standing in front of someone else's monument, they recognized it as holy, and they wanted to be buried there too. Number 1, the structure that breaks the timeline. And at the very bottom of this list waits the one that simply breaks the timeline we've all agreed to live by. Picture the most isolated, most deliberately engineered enclosure of everything we've walked through. A ringed work of earth and stone raised on high ground, far from any decent farmland, and aligned so precisely to the sun that the walls themselves keep a calendar. The light falls exactly where it was meant to fall, on the exact mornings it was built to mark. Building this demanded real engineering, the moving and shaping of an immense volume of earth and stone. And that, in turn, demanded all the things the standard story is so reluctant to grant the ancient people of these mountains. Coordinated labor, a food surplus to feed the workers, long-range planning, a population organized enough to spend years on a structure that grew no crops and fed no one. And there is no writing to credit, no inscription, no carved name, nothing but the work itself, standing there, refusing to be explained. The precision points to astronomers. The sheer scale points to an organized society with leaders and laborers and a shared purpose. And the textbooks have spent a very long time insisting that neither of those things was supposed to exist on this ground. It was raised, with patience and mathematics and a clear knowledge of the sky, by exactly the people we have spent centuries agreeing to call primitive. Look at the wall. Then look at the word. They can't both be right. The oldest mountains on Earth are covered in work we still can't read, raised by people we've spent far too long underestimating. And the postcard version of Appalachia never mentions a single stone of it. So tell us about the one near you, the wall or the mound or the pile of rock everybody just calls the old thing and nobody can explain, because those are the ones we're hunting next. Subscribe, and the next investigation is already waiting for you right there on screen.